Hey everybody, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com. And as usual, during these recordings, you are part of a stamp club meeting. And today we are focused on making a really pretty shadow box. This is made out of cardstock, and it's made out of one of my favorite colors. It's Blackberry Bliss. I'm going to change up the color of the frame. It's a little hard to see on the camera with the different nooks and crannies and things like that. But I'm going to recreate the shadow box and briefly talk about the design that I put on the inside. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing you are going to need is a piece of cardstock. And we're going to start with a piece of cardstock that measures 8.5 by 9.5. So 8.5 by 9.5 is the starting point. And for this card, the one that I'm making right now, I am going to use old olive. I thought that would be a nice neutral color. It's a little bit easier to see, as you can tell already on the camera. And it's just a regular piece of 8.5 by 11. I'm going to cut the 11-inch side down to 9.5. And when I'm cutting a piece that is bigger than the normal size of the paper trimmer, so when it's over 6 inches, I like to extend the arm. It just gets a much more accurate measurement. So I'm cutting it at 9.5. And now I have my starting point. And what we're going to do on this piece of paper is make some score lines, do some burnishing and cutting, and create our shadow box. So the first diagram that I want to point you to, and this is in a tutorial that will be included in the notes, and some of the folks who are on the Stamp Club have this already, but this is the first step. And this is the 8.5 by 9.5 sheet of paper. And what we're going to do is on each of the 4 sides, don't pay attention to E and F just yet. We're going to look at A through D. So on each of the 4 sides, we're going to make 4 score lines, and they're going to be at the exact same measurement on each side. The first one is going to be a 1/2 inch. Then we're going to go to 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and 2. Okay. So what that means is grab your scoring board, put your cardstock in, and it really doesn't matter, but I'm starting with mine. The first side is going to be on the 8.5 inch. And I'm just going to move this so I have a little bit of a better kind of grip on the side. The first score line that I'm going to do is 1/2 inch. This is, for me, the hardest one because I'm kind of pulling the paper over to the corner when I'm doing that. So 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, and 2. We're going to do the exact same thing on all of the other 3 sides. So I'm just going to move my paper. I'm turning it counterclockwise and putting that second corner right against the edge. I'm going to start at 1/2. So 1/2 inch. Oops, it doesn't matter. That's going to get cut out. 1 inch, 1.5, and 2. You're going to be doing this in your sleep. You will have this mantra of 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2. Now I'm going to the third corner. 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2. And the last side, yep, we're doing the same thing. So we're starting at 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2. So this is what my paper looks like at this point. On each side, we've got the 4 score lines, and where they meet, and that will be important in a minute, we have a series of squares. But there's one more thing that we need to do before our scoring is completed. And that's when I'm going to bring back in this little template, and we'll talk about what E and F are. So I'm going to make the score lines that I have labeled as E and F on the 8.5 inch sides. You'll notice that they're on both sides. They're on opposite sides. And what this is going to do is eventually it's going to allow us to make some mitered corners. So you're going to see that E is at 2.5 inches, but notice you only score down to the second score line that you've already made. And then F is going to be at 6 inches, and you're going to do the same thing. And then if you literally flip your paper 180 degrees, you're going to make the exact same score line. So 2.5 inches and 6. So what that looks like when you bring your scoring board back in, and I'm putting mine on the 8.5 inch side, I'm going to score at 2.5, but I'm only going to go down to that second score line. So at 2.5, down to the second score line, and 6, and down to that second score line. And then I'm going to flip this completely over. So the score lines I just made are down at the bottom. And now up at the top, I've got my other 8.5 inch side. At 2.5, I'm going to go down to that second score line. And at 6, I'm going to go down to that second score line. So this is what my paper looks like at this point. I'm going to turn it to the 9.5 just so I can get it in the camera. I've got all those score lines the same on each corner. And then on the 8.5 inch side, I have 2 more score lines. Our scoring is done. What we now need to do is a little bit of burnishing and some cutting. And here's what I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to show you where we're going. This is also in the tutorial. And let me orient you. You'll see that these are the score lines, those 2 that we just put in. We need to cut out the corners where those little squares are on each of the 4 sides. I want to show you what I think is the easier way to do this. And what it's going to involve is a little bit of burnishing before we cut. So I'm going to turn my paper so that the bumps are facing me. I just do that for folding. And on that 4th score line, it doesn't matter what side you start on. You can start on any side, but on that 4th score line, fold that over and give it a good burnish. What we're going to do is we're going to fold that 4th score line on each side. Don't worry about the other ones right now. Just go into the 4th one, which is the one in the middle, and score that. And this is going to give us the visual crease where we're going to need to cut. It's just a little bit easier, and it's really a lot easier, especially if you have designer series paper, because you can make these shadow box cards from cardstock, obviously, like we're doing. That was the 4th score line. This is my last side. I'm just going to fold that in. So you can make these out of cardstock, designer series paper. And if you've got designer series paper, it can be a little tough to see where these score lines are. So this is where you are right now. And you can see by doing that burnishing, you can really see those lines a lot easier. So here's what you're going to do. Grab a pair of scissors, and we're going to cut these out. So just like the diagram where these are, this is what we need to cut out. So where I've made the burnish lines is where I'm going to cut. And if you can try to cut right in the middle of that burnish line, like kind of right on top, try to do that. It's just going to help your box fold a little bit better. And if you don't worry about it. As I like to say, just let it go. It'll be fine. So we're going to take that corner out. This is not going to be used in the shadow box, and I would keep it because I think it's a cool little piece of paper. It may or may not be on a project that I'll come up with fairly soon, but it definitely is not something that you're going to be using on this project. And we're just going to cut out each of these corners. I did watch a couple of different videos on YouTube, and just like anything, there are many ways to make shadow boxes. And I decided that I really wanted to use this pattern. To me, and I've tweaked a couple little things here and there, but it's kind of the easier one, I think. There's some that get a little fancy and more engineered, and this is pretty straightforward. All right, we've got one more corner to cut out, and then we will have our second step completed. And then we're going to move on to getting to our mitered corners. That will be the next thing that we're going to do. Okay, so this is where you should be right now. And the only thing that you've done is cut out the corners. And that's what it's going to look like. So the next thing that we need to do, and I'm going to show you where we're headed, is we need to do a little bit of work. Move it like this. We need to do a little bit of work on the sides where we made those extra 2 score lines. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up doing some cuts and then a little diagonal cut. And let me show you ultimately where we're headed, okay? So when we're done with all of this, this is what we want that side to look like. And the way we're going to do that is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut where these 2 X's are and cut out where those 2 X's are. So what that means is if you look at either side of where you made those 2 additional score lines, you are going to come in and you are going to cut exactly where you made that score line. When you went in at the 2.5 inches and up to the second score line, you're going to cut where you did that score line. And then you're going to come over to the side and you're going to cut that out. So when you look at the diagram, those 2 X's are now gone. So that's what I mean by those X's coming out. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. And then I'll show you how to do the other step on this. And that the second step that we're going to do here in just a minute is the last step before we start putting things together. And I'm just going to cut that out. So I have those 2. That's where those 2 score lines were. And now I need to do the other side. Just going to cut up where I made that score line. Turn it to the side. Cut that out. What's also really, really cool about these shadow boxes is, and I will include this in a second video that I'm going to post, you can customize the size of your shadow box. And the customization part is how wide you want the frame, how deep you want the frame. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So we have cut where those X's are, right? We've taken out those 2 areas. And now we need to do a little bit of a diagonal cut. So if I bring this back in, you're going to see we've we've done part one. We took out those angles. Now we need to do a little mitering. Here's what I like to do, because it's just easier for me to reach. I'm going to grab a smaller pair of scissors just because, and I'm going to fold these flaps in. It becomes a little bit easier to manage, at least for me. And what I want to do is I want to cut from this corner right here up to that corner. So I'm going to make a diagonal cut. And I'm just going to go right in on that corner and cut right up to there. So that's how I'm getting my mitering. All right. Then if you flip it over, you don't have to, if you're holding this flap in, you're not having to finagle your hands around. It's just a lot easier. It's kind of nice that we're able to do that with this particular piece. And I'm just going to cut and make that little miter. Now I need to do it on the other side. And then I'm going to have all my cutting. And I just need to do a little bit more burnishing when all is said and done. And we'll be ready to go. So I did that one. I'm going to flip this one over. And we get some of this out of the way. Okay. So here's where you should be right now. On opposite sides, this is what your piece looks like. On opposite sides, this is what your piece looks like. And you are now ready to do a little bit more burnishing, and then we'll be ready to put everything together. So where we need to get is we need to get all of the score lines burnished. And pick a side and just start burnishing. And the one thing I will say is when you're doing this, just try to make sure that those pieces are parallel. You have cheats, you have those initial burnish lines that you've used, and just try to make sure, as best as you can, that everything is sort of straight against itself. And we're going to do this on all four corners or all four sides. I mentioned a couple minutes ago that you can customize the size of these shadow boxes, and I actually customized the size of this one. I figured out what I was going to use in the middle as the design, how much room I wanted for that design. I could have made it square. I chose to do a rectangle. And then I made a few more choices. I decided what width the frame was going to be, 1/2 inch. I decided how deep the frame was going to be, 1/2 inch. And then I calculated how big the piece of paper was that I needed to start with. So there are definitely a lot of possibilities with this. There are limits because we can only get to a certain size paper. We're not going to get to really, really, really big paper. But, you know, even with a 12 by 12, you can start with that and make some very nice shadow boxes that have some really interesting dimensions. Okay, so here we are. We have our burnishing done, our cutting done, the mitering done, and we are ready to start putting this together. The adhesive that I really recommend that you use to put this together is Tear and Tape. You can use Tombow, you absolutely can, and I'll talk through how you do that. I am going to use Tear and Tape. It's just been easier for me, but Tombow will work. And based on this diagram, I'm going to show you where you're going to put your Tear and Tape. So it's going to go on furthest flap out on each side. And what I'm going to do, if I go back to what I just burnished, you can see how it's curling up toward me. I'm going to flip that over because I'm going to put tear and tape on the edges on this side of the paper. And here's why. Envision the tear and tape here. That's going to go on the bottom when we put it together. One thing, if you do use tear and tape on this, is you'll see when I put this first side on, try to make sure that you have it from left to right covering your cardstock. And I'm intentionally going to go a little bit further than the edges. You can see I went a little further on either side. I'm just going to flip that over and trim it off. It will work best if you have tear and tape the entire length of what you're going to be adhering. And then you get the challenge of getting tear and tape off your finger. And off camera, it is not working for me, but oh, there we go. Okay. So I've got one piece on, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the other. Tear and tape, we all know, is a great adhesive. It definitely is permanent. It is not super forgiving because once you have it down, you don't have a lot of leeway to move things around. Tombow, like I said, will work on this project. It will give you that ability to move and get your corners absolutely precise and pristine, but you are going to have to hold each of the sides as you do it. And that's not a big deal because they will set fairly quickly. I'm just taking a little bit of a shortcut here. And I do think this works really, really well. And the tear and tape that Stampin' Up! Sells is definitely affordable. It's a very big roll. It lasts quite a long time. And I never used to use it, but I use it quite a bit right now. It's really good for boxes and things like this too, because it gives you a really sturdy adhesive. So just one more here, and then we're going to start putting our sides together. And we're done with that tear and tape after we've put all four sides on, or if you have not yet put the tear and tape on and you're planning to use Tombow, that's great. I imagine you could use a tape runner. I'm not very good at tape runners, so I have kind of steered away from those. I do not recommend glue dots on this. There is too much tension with the edges pulling off, and especially when you get to the mitered corners, glue dots are not going to hold this. So I do not recommend that. Okay, we are ready to put this together. The first two sides that you want to put together are the straight ones. So these two, not the ones where you have the mitered corners. The mitered ones are going to come last. So what I'm going to do on one of these is I'm just going to give that tear and tape a really nice burnish. It helps if you do that so that you can get the wax paper off a little bit easier. Go ahead and take off that wax paper. Now watch me do one before you do it. What I'm going to do is fold it in half. So I'm just folding it at that second score line. I'm folding it in half. And what I'm going to do is flip it over. Just flip it over on itself. And you can hear that my fingers are sticking. So I'm just going to hold that and I'm going to flip it over. And then I'm going to burnish. And I'm going to push it all the way flat and I'm going to burnish it again. And by doing that, especially the burnishing, what you should end up with is a side that is nice and perpendicular. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And what that means is, again, I'm going to burnish the tear and tape and then take off that wax paper backing. And the goal is to fold this in half, fold this side in half. So again, it's on that second score line and fold it completely over. And you're going to hear that tear and tape kind of sticking to my fingers, and just fold it flat. Burnish. That's really the burnishing at this point is really helping to just get things nice and tidy the way that you want them. Push it flat, going the other direction, and burnish it again. And then you're going to have two sides that look like little tubes, and they should be nice and square. Okay, so we have these sides left. And again, let me show you before you try one of these. I'm not going to take the tear and tape off of this one because I want to explain this one just a tad. What's kind of nice is that these edges that we just did can get folded out of our way, because we're going to need to bring this up. And when I do this, on this side, I'm just going to fold up one, not two. And then I'm going to bring it in like this. So see how that mitered edge does two things? It kind of pulls this out of the way, and it gets our piece so that it lies flat between the two sides. And then what's even more cool is look how this comes together. See how that mitered edge, when you pull everything up, that's where we're going. That's how we get everything nice and squared off. Okay, so on this side, yep, one more time, burnish the wax paper. I have it folded only once. I'm going to take that off. And then I'm folding it right at the top of my mitered corner. So I'm folding it right at the top of that mitered corner, and I'm just going to flatten that down. I can only burnish this one in one way. I can't push that over the other way, but I can tell that it is going to work because I can pull those two together. Pretty cool, huh? And then I'm going to do the other side. I will burnish this, fold it over only once like I have right now, and then I'm going to fold it right here, right at the top of that miter. Push those sides to the side and put that right in like that, and give that a little bit of a burnish as well. So we've got our frame together. The last thing that we need to do in order to make it all nice and tight and pretty, I'm going to bring back in one that I haven't decorated, is we need to get the corners adhered. I know that's a little harder to see with a dark color. So here's where we're going. Here's where we are. This is really important, and please kind of pay attention. I know you're probably putting your shadow box together, but one of the things to think about when you're doing this, I'm just working this before I put glue in. So try to work your box just a little bit before we put the glue on, is that the glue that you use, we're going to actually put on the sides, the straight sides, and we're going to tuck it up underneath the mitered corners and then adhere it together. But think about this. When you're pushing this side up and in, if you have a lot of glue on here, it's going to get all gloppy, and it might come out beyond that mitered corner. So as odd as this sounds, when you put the glue on, you really want to put it kind of right on that line where you made the burnish. And that way, when you pull it all together, even if it flattens out, if the glue flattens out, it hopefully isn't going to gush. all these crazy adjectives about glue. And you don't want to put a lot. So that's about as much as I'm going to put right on that sort of that burnish line. I'm going to do it again right here. I'm going to put it on all four corners. I'm going to try and do all four corners at the same time. It's just easier. So I've got glue on all four corners. Not a whole heck of a lot. And then I'm going to pull it all together. All right, so we're going to start one. Pull those little guys together. You are going to have to hold this for a couple of seconds. And if you do get the glue coming up like that, don't panic. You can take a piece that you cut off and you can use it to kind of get the excess glue off before it dries. And if you don't get all the glue off before it dries, don't worry about it. These little erasers are fabulous. I'm just going to move over to the other corner. And I'm also going to try and kind of push that up underneath a little bit because that's going to help add a little more adhesive. And just make sure that that's starting to adhere. And some corners are going to be a little more challenging than others. It's just going to be the way it is because even when you were cutting, you didn't get everything absolutely the same. And then I'm just going to hold this for a couple of seconds and let it set. But the steps that we just went through are the basic steps to make these shadow boxes. And the steps that we went through are the exact same, regardless of the size that you make. And I'm going to talk, I'm not going to make this, but I'm going to talk about how I made the decorations for the inside of the initial box. And then you are just going to have so many options when you put your boxes together. And you can see that that adhesive is really setting. So the box is definitely coming together. There is a little bit of glue. I'm going to let that set. And then I've got this gum eraser. This will definitely take the glue off. If you don't have one of these, I suggest that you might want to invest in one. They're super handy. But I have my shadow box together. So let me pull out the one that I had as the original example. And I just want to talk about the decorations that I used to finish this box. So the first thing that I used, and this might be an item that you kind of don't look at a lot in the catalog. This is the Memory and More's pack. And it's on page 26, I believe, in the catalog. It's called Thoughtful Journeys, Memories and More. And there are some gorgeous cards. They come in two sizes, 3x4 and 4x6. They're double-sided. Some have sentiments, others have beautiful, beautiful colors. And I chose to use one that has pretty much one of the patterns on the Thoughtful Journeys designer series paper. So the dear friend was not on there, nor was the butterfly. I added those, but this is the card that comes in the pack, and it's just gorgeous. I also did some stamping on the card, which is nice. You can do what you want to on these. I put Dear Friend from the Spotlight on Nature. I did that in Rich Razzleberry. And then I put the butterfly, and I intentionally put the butterfly so that it looked like it's hovering around one of the flowers. And to create the butterfly, let me show you a little bit closer. This is three-dimensional. It's really kind of cool. And one of the pieces of the designer series paper that is in that Thoughtful Journeys is a really pretty, this is the piece. It's just a kind of an abstract piece. I stamped the butterfly on that twice in Memento ink, black Memento ink. And then I cut out, I did fussy cut, I cut out just the wings. And what I did on this one is I started by paper piecing, which simply means adding directly on top. So let me show you. I just cut that piece out and then I used a little bit of adhesive and I glued it directly on top of the stamped image. And this is a great technique on its own. It's a great way to add some beautiful color to a stamped image. And then the second set of wings, I curled up just a little bit, added a little bit of Tombow right at the edge where the body would be. I did take off a little bit of that glue. I didn't want too much. And then I put it so that the wing isn't exactly going over the first, so that it, even if you're looking at this straight on, it looks like you have a couple of wings. And then you've got a three-dimensional butterfly. Super easy, super easy. To finish this off, before I ended up putting it in the frame, I used some linen thread. Just loop that around a few times, put a double bow, and then added a couple of these beautiful, these are the purple fine shimmer gems. I like putting one in the middle of the linen thread. I think that's pretty. And then a couple more up at the top. To me, a shadow box, since it has height, just says put something in that has height. It has that 3 dimensions. And that's why I did the butterfly. I am not going to bore you to tears as I think about finishing off the box that I just made, but I wanted to show you a little bit of a different idea and a little bit more color. I cut a piece of cardstock. This is the new Petunia Pop. And I cut that a little bit less than the size of the inside of this box. So it's 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. The inside is 3 1/2 by 4 1/2. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do this now, but I'm going to do kind of the same design as the initial one, but I wanted to break up the color between the card and the frame. Here I liked the Blackberry Bliss just by itself, but on this one I wanted to kind of give a little bit more between the greens. So I thought I would put a little frame behind what I did. And when I post this on YouTube, I will have finished this, so you will be able to see what it looks like when it's done. I hope that you enjoy these shadow boxes. I think you're going to find a lot of uses for them, and you are going to see that you'll be able to make them out of different colors. This is pretty in pink. Exactly the same thing that we just did in terms of all the dimensions and the cutting. They're just very useful. And in the next video that I post, I'm going to show you how to start with a 12 by 12 piece. And we're going to make this kind of frame that has a 1 inch side and a 1/2 inch depth. Exactly the same process that we did, but I'm also going to tell you how to calculate the paper that you start with. So I hope to see all of the shadow boxes that you're going to make. And again, I really hope that you have enjoyed learning how to do this. So until next time, happy stamping.